My alarm blared at 6:30 a.m., same as every Monday. I slapped it silent, dragging myself from the tangle of sheets that testified to another restless night. Phoenix summers were brutal that way. Even with air conditioning, the heat found ways to make sleep elusive. Another thrilling week in the life of Michael Reeves, structural engineer, I muttered to the empty bedroom. The morning news played from my phone as I showered and dressed. Standard fare, political squabbles, economic forecasts, weather. Outside, the neighborhood felt quieter than usual. Mrs. Vanshew wasn't watering her desert-defying garden. No joggers. No kids waiting for school buses. I checked my watch, 7:15 a.m. Maybe everyone was running late today. I backed my Civic out of the driveway, the radio automatically connecting to my phone. Traffic report announced congestion downtown, but when I hit the freeway, it was suspiciously clear. Half the usual cars at most. I made it to my exit in record time. The radio cut out mid-song, replaced by that distinctive emergency broadcast tone that always made my skin crawl. This is an emergency alert for Maricopa County. At 3:47 a.m., authorities reported an incident in downtown Phoenix. Citizens are advised to avoid the area bounded by Washington Street, Jefferson Street, 7th Avenue, and 7th Street until further notice. This is not a test. Stand by for further information. The message repeated once before regular programming resumed. The announcer continued as if nothing had happened. Probably a gas leak or water main break. Downtown was mostly office buildings and commercial spaces, minimal population at that hour. Still, something felt off about the vague wording. An incident. What kind of incident? I pulled into the drive-thru at my usual coffee spot. The barista looked tired, dark circles under her eyes. Grande dark roast black, I ordered. She nodded without the usual small talk, movements mechanical as she handed over my coffee. The cup felt warm, normal. At least something was working as expected. As I approached downtown, I could see police barricades redirecting traffic several blocks from my office. No smoke, no obvious signs of disaster. Just officers in reflective vests waving cars away. I took a detour, circling around to approach from the east. That's when I noticed the shadows. At first, I thought it was a trick of the morning light, unusual angles casting elongated silhouettes across building facades. But the sun's position didn't match what I was seeing. Some shadows stretched horizontally across walls, others crawled up buildings instead of down. Most unsettling were the human-shaped ones, frozen in mid-stride or standing with arms outstretched. A chill ran through me despite the already climbing temperature. I blinked hard, but the shadows remained. My office building stood just outside the cordoned area. I parked in the half-empty garage and took the elevator up to the 14th floor. Reynolds Engineering typically buzzed with activity by 8 a.m., but today at least half the desks sat empty. "Where is everyone?" I asked Diane, our receptionist. She glanced up from her computer, expression flat. "Called in. That thing downtown has traffic messed up." "What exactly happened downtown?" She shrugged. "Some kind of explosion, they're saying. No details yet." I settled at my desk, booting up my computer. My office mate Craig's workspace was untouched from Friday, unusual for someone who typically arrived by 7:30. I texted him, "You stuck in traffic?" No response. My email loaded with the usual Monday morning flood, but mixed in were several automated cancellations for meetings and site visits scheduled downtown. Nothing specific, just cited the ongoing situation as reason for postponement. I pulled up local news sites. Headlines mentioned an incident under investigation and possible explosion in downtown Phoenix, but details were sparse. Comment sections overflowed with speculation, everything from gas line ruptures to terrorist attacks. My phone buzzed with another emergency alert. Update: downtown Phoenix remains closed until further notice. Please avoid the area. Emergency services are on site. There is no immediate danger to surrounding neighborhoods. Follow instructions from authorities. Still nothing specific. I scrolled through social media, finding shaky video clips of police barricades and hazmat-suited figures moving around the restricted zone. One tweet caught my attention. No ambulances. No medical response. Just hazmat and military. What aren't they telling us? #Phoenix incident. The user was right. All the emergency vehicles visible in footage were police, fire department, or unmarked government-looking SUVs. No medical response for an explosion seemed odd. My desk phone rang, startling me. "Reynolds Engineering, this is Michael." "Michael, it's Mom." Are you okay? We heard about Phoenix on the news. I'm fine, Mom. It's some situation downtown, but I'm safe at the office. They're saying there was an explosion, but no casualties. How is that possible? I frowned. I don't know. Information's pretty limited right now. Your sister tried calling you 3 times. Phone service has been spotty, I said, noticing my cell signal fluctuating between 2 and no bars. I'll call her back. Just be careful, okay? Dad thinks. The line went dead. I tried calling back, but couldn't get through. By lunchtime, the office felt like a ghost town. Most people who had shown up left early, citing concerns about getting home if more roads closed. My project deadline wouldn't magically disappear, so I stayed, working through calculations for a new apartment complex on the city's edge. Around 3 p.m., Diane poked her head in. Building management wants everyone out by 4. They're doing some system test or something. Sure, I'll wrap up. After she left, I stood to stretch and walked to the window. From 14 floors up, I could see over some of the barricades into the restricted zone. Nothing obvious, no smoke, no debris, no collapsed buildings. Just empty streets and those strange shadows, more visible now as afternoon sun cast stronger light. I gathered my things and headed out, stopping at the convenience store near my house for essentials. The clerk eyed me nervously as I paid for milk, bread, and beer. You coming from downtown? He asked. Near there. Why? He leaned forward. My cousin's on the force. Says they can't find any bodies. What do you mean? The explosion. No casualties, no injuries, they're saying. But my cousin says there's no bodies, man. Just. He hesitated, shadows. I forced a laugh. What, like outlines? Like in old cartoons? He didn't smile back. Something like that. I drove home uneasily, the clerk's words echoing. The sun began its descent as I pulled into my driveway, casting long shadows across my front yard. Normal ones, following the rules of light and perspective I understood. Inside, I flipped on the TV for background noise while unpacking groceries. Every channel had switched to news coverage of the Phoenix incident. Aerial footage showed the cordoned area, a roughly 16-block section of downtown. Reporters stood at barricades, recycling the same limited information with increasing urgency in their voices. Authorities continue to investigate. No confirmed casualties. Residents advised to remain calm. As dusk settled, I opened a beer and stepped onto my back patio. The sunset painted the sky an unnatural crimson, beautiful but ominous. My phone chimed with yet another alert. This is an emergency update for Maricopa County. The situation downtown is controlled. Residents should continue normal activities, but remain vigilant. Report any unusual observations to the hotline at 555-0123. Normal activities. Remain vigilant. The contradiction wasn't lost on me. I looked up from my phone to the darkening sky. Something about the sunset's red glow against my back fence caught my attention, a shadow that shouldn't be there. A human silhouette, arms slightly raised, perfectly still. I blinked, and it was gone. Just my imagination. Had to be. I went inside, locked the doors, and closed all the blinds. The emergency broadcast system interrupted the evening news with the same message from my phone. The anchors continued their loop of non-information afterward, smiling too widely, eyes tight with unspoken tension. I shut off the TV and sat in silence, listening to the unusual quiet of my neighborhood. No distant traffic, no voices, no dogs barking, just the faint, persistent hum of helicopters circling somewhere in the distance. 2 days after the initial alert, I woke before my alarm to an unsettling silence. No birds, no distant traffic hum, no air conditioners cycling on and off throughout the neighborhood. I checked my phone, 5:47 a.m., Wednesday. 3 missed calls from my sister, Claire, and 1 from my project manager asking if I was coming in today. Apparently, Reynolds Engineering remained open despite half the staff not showing up. The shower water ran cold after 2 minutes. I cursed, toweled off, and tried the kitchen sink. Same problem. The news had mentioned possible infrastructure adjustments, whatever that meant. I made a half-hearted breakfast of cereal with the last of my milk and stepped outside to retrieve my newspaper. The street stretched empty in both directions. Mrs. Vanch's house across the way stood dark, blinds still drawn. Her car remained in the driveway, right where it had been for days now. A children's bicycle lay abandoned on the Rodriguez's lawn next door. Instead of the newspaper, I found a photocopied notice on my driveway. Emergency notice. All Phoenix residents are required to remain indoors after sunset until further notice. Authorities are working to restore normal conditions following Monday's incident. Your cooperation ensures public safety. No letterhead, no signature, just blocky text on white paper. I crumpled it into my pocket and stood surveying the neighborhood. The silence felt physical, pressing against my eardrums. Then I noticed the sidewalk across the street. Dark patches marked the concrete at regular intervals. Perfect silhouettes of human figures, like someone had spilled black paint in the precise shape of walking pedestrians. The shapes were flat, featureless, yet somehow captured posture and motion. A jogger mid-stride, a walker with arms swinging. What the hell? I crossed the street for a closer look. The silhouettes weren't painted on. They seemed embedded in the concrete, as if the sidewalk itself had darkened in those exact patterns. I crouched to touch one, a child-sized outline with what looked like a backpack. The surface felt cool, slightly tacky, like congealed ink. My fingers came away clean, but tingling slightly. Back at the house, I tried the TV. All local channels showed the same emergency broadcast screen with scrolling text. Remain calm. Follow instructions. Avoid downtown Phoenix. Report unusual activity. National news networks had minimal coverage, vague mentions of an industrial accident requiring specialized cleanup. My cell phone rang, Claire's name on the display. Michael, thank God. I've been trying to reach you since Monday. Her voice sounded strained, higher than normal. Sorry, phone service has been spotty. Everything's fine. Fine? CNN is talking about a full military quarantine of downtown Phoenix. I moved to the window, peering through blinds. It's not that dramatic. Some kind of industrial accident downtown. They've got it contained. Then why are there reports of people missing? Social media is full of Phoenix residents who can't reach family members. A military Humvee rolled slowly down my street, two soldiers in what looked like modified hazmat suits scanning houses with handheld devices. Listen, Claire, I'm sure it's being blown out of proportion. You know how these things go. Michael, Phoenix news isn't reaching outside markets. Local stations aren't broadcasting beyond city limits. That's not normal. The Humvee stopped in front of the Rodriguez's house. One soldier photographed the abandoned bicycle, while another collected samples from dark patches I hadn't noticed before on their driveway. I should go, Claire. Reception's bad. I wasn't lying. Her voice had begun breaking up. Michael, listen to me. You need to. Static overtook her voice, then silence. I pocketed my phone and moved away from the window when the Humvee rolled toward my house. For reasons I couldn't articulate, I didn't want them to see me watching. My laptop connected to neighbors' Wi-Fi since mine had gone out yesterday. I scrolled through countless social media posts about the Phoenix incident. Speculation ran wild. Chemical leak, dirty bomb, mass hallucinations from water contamination. Most concerning were the numerous posts asking about missing people. Anyone heard from my mom on West Coronado Road? Entire office building on Central Avenue, not responding to calls. Has anyone seen my kids? They were at Washington Elementary when the lockdown started. Scattered among these were mentions of shadow people and dark silhouettes, dismissed by most commenters as conspiracy theories. Outside, the Humvee had moved on. I grabbed my camera, an old DSLR I rarely used, and walked to the Rodriguez's house. Their front door stood slightly ajar. Hello, Mr. Rodriguez? Maria? No answer. The entryway looked normal, keys in a bowl, mail stacked neatly. In the living room, 2 coffee mugs sat on the table, one with lipstick on the rim. A child's homework lay half completed on the dining table, pencil still resting on the paper. No signs of panic or hasty departure. Just absence. I stepped back outside, photographing the dark silhouettes on their driveway. Adult male, adult female, small child. Perfect outlines, like shadows frozen at high noon. Back home, I downloaded the photos to my laptop. The silhouettes showed clearly, but with an odd quality. They seemed to absorb light, creating a depth that shouldn't be possible in a 2-dimensional shape. When zoomed in, the edges of each shadow figure appeared slightly fuzzy, almost vibrating. The emergency alert system on my phone activated with a harsh tone. This is an emergency directive. All Phoenix residents must remain indoors from sunset to sunrise. Do not attempt to leave the city. Checkpoints have been established on all major highways. This measure protects you. Compliance is mandatory. The message repeated in Spanish, then ended. Seconds later, my phone lost all signal bars. By late afternoon, I'd photographed over 24 shadow silhouettes within a 1-block radius of my house. They appeared on sidewalks, driveways, against walls, all in natural walking or standing poses. None overlapped. None appeared distorted. As sunset approached, more military vehicles moved through the neighborhood. The power flickered twice, then stabilized. I closed all blinds and locked every door and window, suddenly aware of how exposed I'd been all day. Night fell with unnatural swiftness. No gradual fading of light, just a sudden drop as if someone had thrown a switch. The silence deepened. Around 8 p.m., my laptop screen flickered, the only light source in my darkened living room. The camera photos I'd been reviewing distorted briefly, shadow outlines seeming to ripple before stabilizing again. A notification popped up. Laptop battery at 17% despite being plugged in. The charging icon showed, but the percentage kept dropping. I shut it down to conserve power. In the dark, with only my phone flashlight, I moved to the kitchen for candles I kept for power outages. The beam swung across the floor, illuminating something that made me freeze. My shadow. Cast by the phone's light, it stretched across the kitchen floor, but it wasn't moving with me. While my arm was raised holding the phone, the shadow showed arms at its sides. When I stepped backward, the shadow remained still. I swept the light back and forth. The shadow stayed fixed, a perfect silhouette disconnected from my movements. Heart pounding, I backed against the wall, keeping the light trained on that impossible shadow. As I watched, it seemed to deepen, growing darker than merely the absence of light should allow. The emergency alert tone blared from my phone, making me jump. The screen lit up with text. Emergency update. Do not look directly at shadows after sunset. Close all blinds. Cover all reflective surfaces. Wait for morning. Help is coming. My phone died immediately after, plunging me into complete darkness. Something moved in that darkness. Not physically. I felt no displacement of air, heard no footsteps. Rather, something shifted in the quality of the darkness itself, as if the absence of light had become a presence of its own. I fumbled for matches, hands shaking violently. The first one broke. The second flared to life, illuminating a small circle around me. My shadow was gone from the floor. Instead, it stood on the kitchen wall, a perfect silhouette of myself, but with its head turned, looking back at me. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment I was huddled in the corner of my kitchen, clutching a butcher knife and watching my shadow self on the wall. The next, morning light was streaming through the blinds, and I was slumped against the refrigerator, neck stiff, knife still gripped in my hand. The wall where my autonomous shadow had stood showed nothing unusual now. Just beige paint in need of touching up. My phone remained dead despite plugging it into different outlets. The power was on, lights worked, refrigerator hummed, but nothing would charge. I tried my laptop again. It booted up but couldn't connect to any networks. The TV flickered to life, showing a press conference already in progress. A man in a crisp suit stood at a podium adorned with federal emblems. The caption identified him as Dr. Elliot Harmon, CDC Emergency Response Coordinator. Containment protocols have been completely successful. There is absolutely no risk to citizens outside the quarantine zone. His smile seemed practiced, his eyes never meeting the camera. What about reports of missing persons? Called a reporter off screen. We have no confirmed missing persons at this time, Dr. Harmon replied smoothly. The evacuation of downtown was organized and accounted for all individuals. What you're seeing on social media are rumors and misinformation from people who haven't been able to contact friends or family due to telecommunications disruptions. Lies. The Rodriguez family hadn't evacuated. Neither had Mrs. Vanshu, or the family in the blue house down the street, whose name I'd never learned. Sources claim this wasn't an explosion but something else entirely, another reporter pressed. Can you confirm the nature of the incident? Dr. Harmon's expression tightened momentarily. The situation involved an industrial accident that has been contained. I'm not at liberty to discuss specifics for national security reasons. The camera panned briefly, showing armed military personnel at the edges of the room. One whispered urgently into his radio, eyes scanning the assembled press. We're asking all Phoenix residents to remain patient and follow instructions from authorities, Dr. Harmon continued. Stay in your homes between sunset and sunrise. Report any unusual observations. And most importantly, his eyes finally met the camera, expression deadly serious. Do not approach or interact with any anomalous shadow phenomena. The broadcast cut abruptly to a local anchor who began discussing water conservation tips with forced cheerfulness, as if the previous segment hadn't happened. An emergency alert tone blared from the TV. Emergency directive. All residents south of Thomas Road must evacuate immediately to designated shelters. Bring only essential medications and identification. Transportation is provided at community collection points. This is not a drill. The message repeated, then the anchor returned, not acknowledging the alert. 30 seconds later, another alert. Emergency correction. All residents south of Thomas Road must shelter in place. Do not evacuate. Remain indoors until further notice. Disregard previous alert. I lived north of Thomas Road, but the contradictory messages sent a chill through me. Were they incompetent or deliberately creating confusion? I scavenged breakfast from pantry items and decided I needed answers. Downtown held the epicenter of whatever had happened, and despite every warning, that's where I needed to go. My car started normally. The radio cycled through stations, all emergency broadcasts or static, except one playing classical music without any DJ interruptions. I switched it off and drove in silence. The streets contained more cars than Monday, but still eerily empty for a weekday. Approaching downtown, I hit the first military checkpoint at 7th Avenue. 2 soldiers in standard camo stood beside concrete barriers, checking IDs. I rolled down my window, forcing a casual smile. Morning. The younger soldier approached. ID and reason for travel, sir. I handed over my driver's license. I work at Reynolds Engineering on Central Avenue. Got projects due. He studied my license, then consulted a tablet. That's within the outer containment zone. No civilians allowed without authorization. Since when? I was there Monday. Protocols change, sir. For your safety. I've got deadlines. Buildings don't design themselves. The older soldier joined us, expression stern beneath his helmet. Sir, nobody's building anything in downtown Phoenix for the foreseeable future. Turn around. Something in his tone made me press further. What exactly happened downtown? The news is saying industrial accident, but... Sir, he cut me off sharply. Turn your vehicle around now, or we'll impound it and escort you home on foot. I raised my hands in surrender. Fine. Just trying to do my job. As I executed a U-turn, I caught the younger soldier saying into his radio, another civilian attempting zone access. Redirected. No absorption signs. Absorption signs? What the hell did that mean? Instead of heading home, I drove north, then east, trying different approaches to downtown. Each street was blocked. At the 4th checkpoint, I didn't even try to pass through, just parked a block away and watched through binoculars from my emergency kit. The soldiers were letting some vehicles through, government SUVs and military transports. Most telling was what I didn't see. No medical vehicles, no ambulances, no victim support services. This wasn't disaster response, it was containment. A loud bang startled me, a helicopter passing low overhead, heading for downtown. Not news or police, but military, with some kind of equipment mounted underneath. It disappeared behind buildings, and seconds later, a strange pulse of light flashed above downtown, like heat lightning but focused. My phone suddenly chimed to life, displaying emergency alert before returning to its black screen. Every car alarm on the street activated simultaneously, then fell silent. Whatever they were doing downtown, it affected electronics miles away. I tried one more approach, driving to an office high-rise at the edge of the quarantine perimeter. I knew the building. Reynolds had designed the structural reinforcements 5 years ago. More importantly, I knew the security guard. Michael. Thought everyone from Reynolds was working from home. Eduardo greeted me at the security desk. Most are. Need to grab some files. I gestured vaguely upward. Mind if I head up to 14? The view might help me see what's happening downtown. Eduardo's friendly expression faltered. They told us not to let anyone above 6. Something about signals and interference. Come on, Eduardo. I just want a quick look. He hesitated, then slid his access card across the desk. 10 minutes. Don't tell anyone. The elevator required the card for floors above 6. I rode to 14 in silence, emerged into an empty hallway. The financial firm occupying this floor had clearly evacuated, desks empty, computers covered in plastic. The west-facing windows provided a clear view of downtown. What I saw made no sense. The central blocks appeared normal from this distance, buildings intact, no smoke or debris. But overlaying the cityscape was a perfect geometric pattern of darkness, as if someone had drawn a precise grid of black lines across the city. The lines followed no infrastructure I recognized, not streets, not power lines, not property boundaries. They formed perfect angles and intersections, with darker nodes at crossing points. Most disturbing were the shadows between buildings, far too dark for midday, moving in ways that defied the sun's position. I raised my phone to take photos, but it remained dead. Movement caught my eye, figures in white hazmat suits walking along one of the dark lines, taking readings with handheld equipment. One looked up, seeming to stare directly at my building despite the distance. He pointed. Seconds later, my vision swam. A high-pitched whine filled my ears, and I staggered back from the window, suddenly nauseated. When I could focus again, I saw something impossible. A man stood on the exterior of the building, directly outside the 14th floor window. Not hanging or climbing, standing perpendicular to the glass as if gravity had shifted. His hazmat suit was pristine white except for the faceplate, which showed only darkness where a face should be. He pressed a gloved hand against the glass, leaving no fog, no prints, just a perfect shadow outline that remained when he pulled away. The outline deepened, darkening until it seemed to eat through the glass without breaking it. A cold sensation washed over me as I backed toward the elevator. The shadow handprint began to spread, tendrils of darkness extending like ink in water. I ran. The elevator doors closed as darkness flooded the hallway behind me. My descent seemed to take hours, each floor passing with excruciating slowness. When the doors finally opened, I sprinted past Eduardo's startled face and didn't stop until I reached my car. As I peeled away from the curb, my rearview mirror showed figures in white suits entering the building. Not running, moving with the calm certainty of those who know their quarry cannot escape. My phone chimed again, one message displayed before the screen died permanently. Attention! Do not observe the containment zone from elevated positions. Compliance ensures survival. 1 week after the initial incident, I couldn't recognize my life anymore. The power grid failed completely 2 days ago. Water pressure dwindled to a trickle before stopping altogether yesterday morning. My neighborhood had emptied out. Houses dark, cars abandoned, no human movement anywhere. I'd been recording everything in a notebook since my electronics died. Observations, theories, timeline of events. The act of writing kept me grounded when reality seemed increasingly fluid. The emergency broadcast system now operated independently of any devices. The alert simply happened. Voices emerging from unpowered radios. Messages appearing on blank walls. Words that seemed to form directly in my mind without passing through my ears. Emergency directive. All surviving citizens must proceed to evacuation points by 1200 hours. Bring no possessions. Submit to screening procedures. Resistance ensures isolation. The broadcasts always used that word, surviving, as if they already knew most of us weren't. I hadn't seen another living person in 3 days. But I wasn't alone. The shadows moved freely now. Not just at night, not just disconnected from their owners, but autonomous. They slid across surfaces, walls, floors, abandoned cars, converging and dispersing in patterns that suggested communication. Sometimes they formed perfect geometric shapes that pulsed and rotated before dissolving back into humanoid outlines. I needed answers. Despite every warning, every instinct screaming danger, I had to see ground zero. I packed a backpack with essentials, water bottles, protein bars, flashlight, first aid kit, notebook. The hunting knife from my father went into my belt sheath. I hesitated over the handgun in my bedside drawer, a Glock 19 I'd purchased after a break-in 3 years ago and fired exactly twice at a shooting range. It felt both useless and necessary. I tucked it into my waistband. The drive downtown proved easier than expected. No military checkpoints remained. No barricades. Nothing prevented entry except common sense and self-preservation. The city transformed as I approached the center. Buildings stood intact but warped somehow, subtle distortions in their proportions, angles that seemed mathematically impossible while still appearing structurally sound. The shadows between them had substance now, a darkness deeper than absence of light. I parked at the edge of what the broadcasts had called the affected zone and continued on foot, weaving through abandoned vehicles. Many contained personal items, phones, bags, children's toys, as if their occupants had simply vanished while driving. The air grew colder as I moved deeper into downtown, despite the Arizona sun beating overhead. Each breath clouded in front of me, impossible for Phoenix in any season. Sound behaved strangely too. My footsteps echoed back seconds after making them, sometimes from directions I hadn't come from. Finally, I reached what had to be ground zero, a perfect circle approximately 100 yards in diameter centered on Civic Plaza. The border was unmistakable. Inside the circle, all color had been leached away. Buildings, pavement, abandoned objects, all appeared in monochrome, like stepping into an old black and white photograph. At the circle's center stood a lone figure in what remained of a lab coat. From my position at the perimeter, I couldn't distinguish gender or age, just a slender human shape facing away from me. They seemed to be writing or drawing something on a small notepad. "Hello," I called out, voice sounding flat in the strange acoustics. The figure turned, male, mid-50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and graying hair. Completely ordinary except for his eyes, which reflected light like polished obsidian. Another observer. His voice sounded layered, as if multiple people spoke in unison. "You're either very brave or completely irrational to come here." I stepped forward, stopping at the monochrome boundary. "What happened here?" "Breakthrough. Rupture. Evolution. Depends on your perspective." He smiled thinly. "Dr. Aaron Chin, Phoenix Quantum Research Institute. Or what's left of him." "Left of him?" "Aaron Chin was absorbed 4 days ago. I retain his memories, his knowledge. But I am not exclusively him anymore." He gestured around the circle. "None of us are exclusively ourselves now." Cold dread pooled in my stomach. What does that mean? Dimensional bleeding. We were attempting to observe quantum superposition at macro scale. We succeeded beyond our parameters. He approached the boundary but remained inside the monochrome zone. The explosion wasn't destructive, it was transformative. We created a permeable membrane between dimensions. The shadows, yes, they've always existed alongside us, occupying the same space in a different phase of reality. Our experiment made them visible, then interactive. Now they're becoming dominant. I struggled to comprehend. You're saying these shadows are beings from another dimension? Not precisely. Think of reality as a stack of transparent films. We exist on one layer, they exist on another. The explosion caused the layers to blur together. He removed his glasses, revealing eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Those who were at ground zero didn't die. We merged with our counterparts from the other side. And the shadows everywhere else? The silhouettes. Echoes of transition. When someone is absorbed, their shadow remains briefly as a doorway between states. His expression grew distant. The military tried to stop it. Containment. Quarantine. But they didn't understand what they were containing. Which is what exactly? Evolution, Mr. Reeves. I froze. How do you know my name? Chin smiled. Your shadow knows you. All shadows are connected across both dimensions. Information flows between them. A helicopter appeared overhead, hovering low. Not military, civilian news chopper with a station logo. Someone had finally broken through the media blackout. Chin glanced up. They won't help. They'll only accelerate the process. What process? Complete dimensional merger. We estimated 2 weeks from initial rupture. Today marks day 7. He checked his watch, an oddly mundane gesture for someone claiming to be merged with an interdimensional being. The broadcasts are preparing survivors for the final phase. The helicopter dipped lower, and I waved frantically. Chin watched with something like pity. You still think escape is possible, he said softly. That's why you came downtown, hoping to find a way to stop this, to save everyone. Isn't that what you were trying to do? I gestured to his notepad. I'm documenting the transformation for whatever comes after. Knowledge should survive, even when species don't. The helicopter suddenly lurched, its shadow on the ground below detaching and stretching upward like a dark hand reaching for the aircraft. The chopper veered away, but its shadow remained, twisting into an impossible shape. You see, Chin said, they're hungry now, learning to feed. A thunderous pulse swept through downtown. Every window for blocks shattered simultaneously. The monochrome circle expanded visibly, color bleeding from everything it touched. Chin stepped back as the boundary passed beneath my feet. The world desaturated around me. Not just visually, sensation itself dulled. Temperature, texture, sound, all flattened into a narrower band of perception. What's happening to me? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Early absorption. Your shadow has been marked since your encounter at the high-rise. They've been waiting for you to come within range. I tried to step back, to retreat beyond the expanding circle, but my legs wouldn't move. Looking down, I saw my shadow had darkened and anchored itself to the pavement, no longer matching my posture. Don't fight it, Chin advised. Those who resist experience prolonged transition. The helicopter reappeared, descending rapidly, obviously in distress. Its shadow continued to stretch upward, forming a dark column that reached for the aircraft like a giant's hand. The moment they connected, the helicopter froze mid-air, not crashing, just stopping, suspended impossibly. Then it began to change, metal surfaces flattening and darkening, as if being painted over with liquid shadow. Within seconds, the aircraft was gone, leaving only a helicopter-shaped silhouette hanging in the air before slowly dissipating. The emergency broadcast voice spoke directly in my mind. Attention! Observation accelerates integration. Close your eyes. Surrender to shadow. Evolution cannot be resisted. Chun watched impassively as I struggled against my anchored shadow. They're not malevolent, you know. They simply exist according to different physical laws. Our dimensions were never meant to overlap. Then why did you make them? I demanded, anger finally breaking through my fear. Science always pushes boundaries without fully understanding consequences. He shrugged. Progress requires risk. My shadow began climbing my body like dark water rising, cold sensation spreading up my legs. Each inch it covered left numbness behind. Is this happening everywhere? I asked, voice shaking. The entire world? No. The effect is localized to Phoenix for now. Chin turned away, walking toward the center of the circle. But the shadows are learning, adapting, spreading. As darkness climbed past my waist, a final emergency alert echoed through downtown, broadcast from every abandoned vehicle, every dead phone, every empty building. This is the final advisory. The Phoenix event has reached critical expansion. There will be no further broadcasts, no further evacuations, no further resistance. I closed my eyes as shadow reached my chest, cold fingers creeping toward my heart. May your transition be swift. I've started keeping a journal now, not to record what's happening, though I do that too, but because I'm beginning to forget things. Important things. Yesterday, I couldn't remember what day it was, which isn't unusual given the circumstances. But then I couldn't remember how I got home. There are blank spots appearing in my mind, like shadows creeping across my memories. The kitchen clock reads 3:17 p.m. I'm sure it was 6:42 a.m., not 5 minutes ago. I've been losing time. I flipped through my new journal. The first entry is dated only 2 days ago, though I could swear I've been writing for at least a week. The handwriting changes subtly between entries. Sometimes tight and controlled, sometimes loose and frantic. All mine, yet not all written by the same version of me. The emergency alert system blares to life again. I've stopped flinching at the sound. Attention citizens of Phoenix and surrounding areas. Mandatory evacuation orders are now in effect for sectors 7 through 12. Proceed to designated extraction points located at all major highway intersections. Do not approach any areas of diminished light. Do not attempt to collect personal belongings. Bring only essential medications and identification. Expect to be processed within 48 hours of arrival. I scribbled a message in my journal, alongside the previous alerts. Then I notice it. The inconsistencies. Yesterday, remain in your homes. Securing your location is paramount. Extraction is impossible at this time. The day before, all citizens must proceed immediately to open areas. Buildings are no longer secure. Await further instructions in clear daylight. None of it makes sense. Sector designations that change daily. Extraction points that don't exist. I checked the one nearest me and found only empty roadblocks, no personnel. Instructions that contradict physical reality. The alert continues. The dimensional anomaly cannot be perceived directly. If you experience synesthesia, temporal displacement, or geometric hallucinations, you have been exposed. Quarantine yourself immediately. Dimensional anomaly. First time they've called it that. Usually it's the incident or the emergency situation. This sounds more honest. I review my notes from yesterday. I wrote down something a physicist told me, Dr. Levine, I think her name was. Met her at a gas station that still had power. She used terms like quantum foam and dimensional bleeding. Said that whatever they were testing at the particle acceleration facility had punched a hole between here and somewhere else. Not an explosion at all. A hole that's getting bigger. The blinking display on my microwave shows impossible symbols. Not numbers, not letters. Something else. They shift when I look directly at them. I unplug the microwave. The symbols remain. My phone buzzes. Unknown caller. I answer. Hello? Who is this? Nothing but static, then words emerging from the noise. They're coming through the shadows. Who is this? Dr. Levine? More static, then. Not an invasion, a convergence, we're becoming. The call drops. I try to redial, but there's no record of any incoming call in my history. I check my phone's photo gallery. 2 weeks worth of pictures documenting everything. The shadow silhouettes left behind when people disappear, the military cordons, the strange geometric patterns forming in the sky that nobody else seems to notice or acknowledge. There's a picture I don't remember taking. It shows me asleep on my couch, taken from above, as if someone or something was standing over me. My shadow in the photo stretches toward the camera, impossibly elongated, reaching up the wall. The lights flicker. They've been doing that more frequently. Not from power surges, but something else, like reality itself is buffering, struggling to maintain consistency. I check my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I look the same mostly, but my eyes seem darker, as if the pupils have expanded. I blink and they're normal again. Just a trick of the light. Has to be. The latest emergency broadcast still echoes in my head. Dimensional anomaly, synesthesia, temporal displacement, geometric hallucinations. I've experienced all three. Yesterday I heard colors. The red emergency lights on abandoned police cars screamed in a high-pitched wail only I could hear. The shadows whispered in deep, resonant browns. Time slips forward and backward without warning. I'll watch the second hand on my watch move counterclockwise for minutes at a time. And the geometries, I see them when I close my eyes. Shapes that shouldn't be possible. Four-dimensional objects projected into our three-dimensional space, folding in on themselves in ways that hurt to comprehend. Am I going insane, or is reality itself breaking down? A knock at the door. I freeze. Nobody should know I'm here. I've been careful. Through the peephole, I see Dr. Levine and a man in a tattered military uniform. I let them in. We don't have much time, she says. Her face is gaunt, eyes bloodshot. The shadows are converging downtown. Lieutenant Roberts here has information. Roberts looks worse than Levine. His uniform bears no insignia, as if they've been carefully removed. His eyes dart around my apartment, looking for threats. I was stationed at the research facility when it happened, he says. They told us it was a controlled test. Nothing dangerous. Just measuring particle decay rates in an isolated chamber. What went wrong? I ask. Nothing went wrong, Levine interrupts. It worked exactly as designed. They just didn't understand what they were looking for. She pulls out a tablet. On it, a classified document with half the text redacted. Project Eclipse. They weren't studying our universe, she continues. They were looking for others. And they found one. Roberts nods. The shadows aren't attacking us. They're replacing us. Our dimension is being overwritten. A chill runs through me. So the evacuation orders. Useless, Levine says. There's nowhere to evacuate to. The effect is spreading at an exponential rate. Then why are they still broadcasting instructions? Roberts laughs bitterly. Control. As long as people think there's a plan, they don't panic. Most command structures collapsed days ago. The broadcasts are automated now, or being issued by people who don't understand what's happening. I show them my journal, the contradictory alerts, my photos. Levine examines them carefully. You've documented more than most, she says. We need to get this information to my colleagues who are still working on a solution. Is there one? I ask. Their silence is answer enough. Levine points to my microwave with the impossible symbols. You can see them too. The transposition glyphs. I nod. That's a good sign, she says. Your mind is adapting. Most people's brains simply shut down when exposed to extra-dimensional stimuli. They go catatonic before being absorbed. Absorbed into what? Before she can answer, the building shudders. Not like an earthquake, more like reality itself vibrating. The lights flicker rapidly, then stabilize at a lower intensity. The shadows in the corners of the room seem deeper, denser. They're here, Roberts whispers, reaching for a sidearm that isn't there. Levine grabs my journal and shoves it into her bag. We need to move. Now. Bring mirrors if you have them. Mirrors? Reflective surfaces disrupt the absorption process. Temporarily, I grab a small makeup mirror from the bathroom and my phone. As we rush toward the door, I catch sight of our reflections in the hallway mirror. 3 people, 3 shadows, but mine doesn't move when I do. It stands perfectly still, watching us leave. In the hallway, Roberts checks both directions before leading us toward the stairwell. Stay away from the elevators, he warns. The shafts are filled with them now. As we descend, I ask the question that's been burning in my mind. What happens to the people who are taken by the shadows? Levine's pace falters for just a moment. We don't know for certain, but they don't appear to be dead. Just transformed. Into what? Into whatever exists on the other side. The stairwell door below us opens with a creak. Robert signals for silence. We wait, listening. No footsteps. No breathing. Just a subtle darkening of the air, as if light itself is being drained away. Roberts mouths one word, run. We turn and sprint upward instead of down. Behind us, darkness flows up the stairs like liquid, defying gravity, reaching for us with tendrils of absolute blackness. I know now why I've been keeping this journal. Not just to remember, but so that someone somewhere might understand what happened here when we're all gone. If we're gone, or if we become something else entirely. Dawn breaks over Phoenix with unnatural brilliance. The sky isn't blue anymore. It's a washed-out gray with patches of something almost purple. Military helicopters circle downtown, their searchlights cutting through the morning haze. For the first time in days, I feel a flicker of hope. Someone with authority is finally doing something. Operation Daybreak, Roberts explains as we watch from the rooftop of an abandoned office building. Last-ditch effort to push back the shadows. Dr. Levine shakes her head, her expression grim. It won't work. You don't know that, Roberts snaps, his military training still evident in his bearing despite his ragged appearance. The brass wouldn't authorize something this scale without solid intel. The brass is desperate, Levine counters. They're throwing light at darkness because they have nothing else. I've been with them for 3 days now. We move constantly, never sleeping in the same place twice. Mirrors and reflective surfaces have become our most valuable possessions. I've lined my backpack with pieces of broken compact discs, their rainbow surfaces catching what little natural light remains. Robert's military radio crackles to life. He still has contacts within what remains of the command structure. Soldiers who share information off the record, because official channels have become useless. This is Foxhound. Operation commencing in 5. All civilians should seek shelter underground. Repeat, seek shelter underground. Light intensity may cause retinal damage. Out. We should go, I say, already moving toward the roof access door. No, Levine grabs my arm. I need to document this. We need to understand what happens. She's been collecting data obsessively, adding her observations to my journal. The physicist in her can't stop analyzing, even as the world collapses around us. The helicopters converge over the darkest part of downtown, the epicenter where it all began. Massive floodlights mounted on their underbellies power up simultaneously, focusing on a single point. From other rooftops, ground-based xenon spotlights join in, their beams so intense they leave purple afterimages on my retinas. They're trying to burn it away, Roberts says, a hint of pride in his voice. Fight darkness with light. The concentrated beams hit the center of the shadow zone, and for a brief, glorious moment, the darkness seems to recede. The military channel erupts with cheers. Then everything goes wrong. The shadows don't burn away. They absorb the light, growing denser, more substantial, like pouring gasoline on a fire. The darkness pulses, expands, and shoots upward in a perfect column that engulfs the nearest helicopter. The aircraft doesn't crash. It simply ceases to exist, leaving behind a perfect shadow silhouette against the clouds. No, 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 Roberts whispers, face ashen. The darkness expands outward in a perfect circle, absorbing light, matter, reality itself. 2 more helicopters vanish. The spotlights on nearby buildings wink out one by one as the operators are consumed. They're feeding it, Levine says, frantically scribbling notes. The energy differential is accelerating the convergence process. The military channel dissolves into chaos, screaming contradictory orders, then static. Roberts throws the radio to the ground. We need to get underground. Now. We barely make it to the basement as the wave of darkness washes over the building. The concrete around us groans as if under immense pressure. Dust shakes from the ceiling. For hours, we huddle in silence, my small makeup mirror clutched in white-knuckled hands, ready to reflect whatever might come through the darkness. When we finally emerge the next day, Phoenix is transformed. At least half the city is now covered in what Roberts calls dark matter. Not true shadows anymore, but something more substantial. Buildings still stand, but their surfaces are coated with a light-absorbing film that makes them look flat, two-dimensional, like cutouts against the sky. Operation Daybreak, I say bitterly. More like Operation Eternal Night. They didn't understand what they were dealing with, Levine says. None of us do, not really. We make our way carefully through empty streets. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just silence and the omnipresent darkness that seems to watch our every move. We need to get to the research facility, Levine says suddenly. The original site. There might be data, equipment we can use. That's suicide, Roberts argues. Ground Zero is completely gone. Not the public facility, she clarifies. The real one. Underground. Roberts stops walking. How do you know about that? Something in his tone makes me step away from both of them. There's a new tension in the air. I consulted on the original project design, Levine admits. Before it went black. You told us you were just analyzing the aftermath. I say, feeling betrayed. She has the decency to look ashamed. I couldn't reveal my clearance level. But it doesn't matter now. What matters is that I know where the secondary facility is located, the one built to monitor long-term effects. Robert studies her for a long moment, then nods. Lead the way. The underground facility is hidden beneath an unassuming office complex on the outskirts of the city. The security systems are still operational, but Levine's credentials get us through. Emergency lighting bathes sterile white corridors in a sickly red glow. Where is everyone? I ask, my voice echoing uncomfortably. Evacuated or absorbed, Levine answers, leading us deeper. This facility was designed to run autonomously if necessary. We reach a central command room filled with monitors displaying data I can't begin to comprehend. Levine immediately goes to work, fingers flying over keyboards, accessing secured files. Project Eclipse, she murmurs. Full documentation. Roberts and I look over her shoulder as classified documents flash across the screen. Technical specifications, risk assessments, contingency plans, and photographs, test subjects exposed to what they call dimensional radiation. The images turn my stomach. People twisted into impossible shapes, their bodies partially transparent, merging with their own shadows. Their faces locked in expressions not of pain, but of ecstasy. They knew, Roberts says, his voice hollow. They fucking knew something like this could happen. Not at this scale, Levine argues weakly. The models predicted contained events, small-scale breaches that could be studied and controlled. And when did these models change? I ask, noticing timestamps on the documents. When did you realize it could be catastrophic? Levine doesn't answer immediately. She pulls up a final document, a probability assessment dated 3 days before the explosion. 97% chance of containment failure if the experiment proceeded. I read aloud. And they did it anyway. The potential benefits outweighed. Don't. Roberts cuts her off. Don't you dare justify this. A low rumbling interrupts the argument. The monitors flicker, showing new data. The shadow matter is moving, converging on our location. It knows we're here, I whisper. Not it, Levine says, pointing to a three-dimensional model on one of the screens. The model shows shapes moving through the shadow matter, geometric forms that shouldn't be possible in our three-dimensional space. Hypercubes, tesseracts, objects with more than 3 dimensions folded into our reality. They're coming through, she says, a note of wonder in her voice. Fully manifesting. Roberts grabs my arm. We need to leave. Now. But Levine remains transfixed by the screens, watching as new data pours in. Don't you understand? This is what we were looking for all along. First contact. The lights flicker more intensely. Through the reinforced windows of the command center, I see something moving in the corridor. Not a shadow anymore, but something with substance, with form, a shape that hurts my eyes to look at directly. Dr. Levine, please, I beg. We have to go. She turns to me, and I realize with horror that her shadow is no longer behind her. It's inside her. Darkness swirls beneath her skin like ink in water. It's too late for me, she says calmly. I've been absorbing the radiation for years. But you should go. Document everything. Someone needs to witness. Roberts pulls me toward the emergency exit as Levine turns back to the monitors. The last I see of her is her silhouette against the screens, her body beginning to lose cohesion, spreading into something else. Something waiting to be born. 1 month since the first alert. Phoenix is a ghost town now, or perhaps more accurately, a shadow town. The sun still rises and sets, but the light seems thin, as if struggling to penetrate an atmosphere that's becoming increasingly hostile to its presence. Most buildings remain standing, their structures intact but their surfaces transformed. They don't reflect light anymore. They absorb it, process it, change it into something else. I haven't seen another living human in 3 days, not since Roberts disappeared. We had made camp in an abandoned subway maintenance tunnel. The underground spaces seemed to resist the shadow encroachment longer than areas exposed to open sky. Roberts had gone to scout for supplies, promising to return before dark. Whatever dark means now, when the difference between day and night has become more conceptual than physical. He never came back. I found his flashlight at the entrance to the tunnel, its beam pointing inward like an accusation. No signs of struggle, no blood, just absence, and when I checked the concrete wall nearby, a new shadow silhouette, arms outstretched, head tilted back, almost peaceful. I've been recording everything in my journal, which has now expanded to 3 volumes. The first contains my initial observations and experiences. The second holds Dr. Levine's notes and theories, salvaged from the research facility before we fled. The third is where I've started working out my own understanding of what's happening, applying what little I remember from undergraduate physics to the incomprehensible. Today, I'm writing by the light of a chemical glow stick in what used to be a public library. The books provide a strange comfort, even though their pages have begun to change. Text rearranging itself when I'm not looking directly at it. Paragraphs that make no logical sense, but somehow convey meaning beyond language. The shadow entities are more visible now. I don't need special equipment to see them. They move through the altered matter coating the city, sometimes passing through solid objects as if they weren't there, sometimes interacting with our physical world in ways that defy conventional physics. I've been studying them, documenting their behavior. They aren't random. They aren't chaotic. There's purpose in their movements, intelligence in their interactions. I've begun to see patterns, massive, citywide configurations that only become apparent when I map multiple sightings over time. They're building something, or perhaps transforming would be more accurate. I flipped through Dr. Levine's notes for the 100th time, searching for insight. The entities aren't three-dimensional beings invading our space. They're higher-dimensional objects intersecting with our reality. What we perceive as shadows are merely cross-sections, like how a sphere passing through a two-dimensional plane would appear as a circle to the plane's inhabitants. First a point, then a growing circle, then a shrinking circle, then gone. I think I understand now. We're not seeing them as they truly are. We can't. Our brains aren't wired to perceive four-dimensional space, let alone the 5 or 6 dimensions these entities might inhabit. The shadows are just the parts we can comprehend, the tip of an interdimensional iceberg. Another passage catches my eye. The absorption process isn't destruction, it's transcription. Human consciousness being rewritten into higher dimensional information states. The shadow silhouettes left behind aren't remains. They're signatures of the transcription process, like fossils of the transformation. I close the journal and lean back against a bookshelf. If Levine was right, then Roberts, Dr. Levine herself, and the thousands of others who've disappeared aren't dead. They've been translated into something else, their consciousness preserved but transformed into a state compatible with the entity dimension. But why? To what end? My watch stopped working weeks ago, but I estimate it's mid-afternoon when I hear it. A sound like distant whale song, vibrating through the building's structure rather than the air. The shadow entities don't usually make noise. This is new. I carefully approach the library's main atrium, a 3-story open space with a glass dome ceiling. The dome is still intact, but now looks like it's made of obsidian rather than glass, darkness given physical form. In the center of the atrium, suspended in midair, is one of the largest shadow entities I've seen. Not human-shaped, nothing so simple. It's a complex geometric form, angles that shouldn't connect, planes that intersect impossibly, curves that bend in directions my eyes can't follow. Looking at it makes my head throb, but I force myself to observe, to document. It's manipulating smaller shadow objects, arranging them in space like components in a vast machine. As I watch, it suddenly pauses, and what I can only describe as its attention turns toward me. I freeze. In all my observations, the entities have never directly acknowledged human presence. They move around us as if we're furniture, obstacles to be avoided rather than beings to interact with. This one sees me. The geometry of its form shifts, parts rotating in ways that should be impossible, and suddenly I understand something I've been missing all along. The entity doesn't see me as I am, a 3-dimensional human. It sees my 4-dimensional self, extending through time as well as space, my past and future connected to my present in one continuous structure. And it's familiar with that structure. Roberts? I whisper, the name feeling strange on my lips after days of silence. The entity doesn't respond, not in words, but something in its configuration changes again. A pattern emerges that reminds me of Robert's silhouette on the concrete wall, arms outstretched, head tilted back. Not communication, recognition. My hands shake as I open my journal and start writing frantically. The entity remains, watching me with senses I can't comprehend. I write in mathematical expressions now, using the equations Levine derived to describe the intersection of dimensions. It's the closest thing to a common language we might have. When I hold up the page, the entity responds. The geometry of its form reconfigures into something that echoes the mathematical structure I've written. Not mimicry, improvement. It's correcting my equations, showing me where my understanding fails. I copy the new configuration, translating as best I can into symbols I understand. It's not just theoretical physics anymore. It's instruction. Hours pass. The light fades outside, though the distinction matters less now. My journal pages fill with hybrid mathematics, part human notation, part something else entirely. The entity, Roberts, or what Roberts has become, is teaching me the physics of its reality. By midnight, I've learned more than Levine and her team discovered in years of research. The entity dimension isn't invading ours. The two are merging, becoming a single reality where both can exist. The shadows aren't consuming our world. They're preparing it, making it compatible with higher dimensional physics. The absorption of humans isn't random. They're selecting for specific neural patterns, minds that can adapt to higher dimensional thinking. People like Levine, with her brilliant physicist's brain. People like Roberts, with his tactical, three-dimensional spatial reasoning. People whose consciousness can survive the translation without fragmenting. And apparently people like me, observers who can document, synthesize, understand. The entity begins to move away, floating toward the darkened dome ceiling. I feel a sudden panic at being left alone again. Wait! I call out. I don't understand everything yet. What happens when the merger is complete? What happens to those of us who remain unabsorbed? The entity pauses. Its form shifts one final time, resolving into a configuration I somehow instinctively understand. Not a message of words, but of concept. Transformation is inevitable for all. The timeline varies, but the outcome does not. Some transform quickly, some slowly. Some require preparation. You're being prepared. Then it passes through the solid dome as if it were no barrier at all, leaving me alone with my journal full of impossible physics and the growing certainty that I'm not documenting the end of humanity. I'm documenting its evolution. Later, as I settle into an uneasy sleep behind the library's reference desk, I notice something that sends a chill through me despite my newfound understanding. My shadow, cast by the fading chemical light, no longer perfectly matches my position. It's practicing movement on its own. 6 weeks since the first emergency alert. I'm alone now, truly alone. The last radio broadcast I managed to pick up was 3 days ago, a looped message from what claimed to be the National Guard, directing survivors to a containment zone in Flagstaff. The voice sounded wrong somehow. Too measured, too calm for someone witnessing the end of everything they've ever known. I didn't try to go. There's no point in running anymore. Phoenix is almost completely transformed. The physical structures remain, buildings, roads, infrastructure, but they're covered in the shadow matter that distorts light and sound. The city has become a charcoal sketch of itself, a place where perspective shifts depending on how you look at it and where you stand. I've taken to living on the move, never staying in one place for more than a day. Not out of fear, but because I'm mapping the changes, documenting the transformation in my journals. I'm on volume 5 now. The previous 4 are hidden in various locations throughout the city. Time capsules for a future I know will never come, but I can't stop myself from creating them. The archivist in me needs to believe that something will find value in what I've witnessed. Today, I'm exploring what used to be Phoenix Children's Hospital. The building's exterior is completely overtaken by shadow matter, but inside, the transformation is more selective. Some rooms remain untouched, bright, sterile, normal, while adjacent spaces have been completely absorbed, becoming pools of dimensional interference where normal physics simply stops working. In one of these interference zones, I discover something extraordinary. A perfect sphere of darkness, about 3 feet in diameter, hovering in the center of what was once an MRI room. Unlike the amorphous shadow matter, This sphere has definition, purpose. It pulses with a rhythm that reminds me of a heartbeat. I approach cautiously, journal in hand. When I reach out, not touching but close, the surface of the sphere ripples, and for a brief moment I see through it. Not into it, through it, to somewhere else. A landscape unfolds before me. Impossible geometries stretching to a horizon that curves upward instead of downward. Structures that might be buildings, might be organisms, pulsing with internal light. And moving among them, the entities. Hundreds of them, thousands, in configurations so complex they make my eyes water. And among these alien forms, I see something familiar. Human shapes, or what used to be human. They move differently now, existing partially in dimensions I can't perceive, but their core structures retain humanoid characteristics. They're integrated with the environment, not separate from it like we are from ours. I see a figure that reminds me of Dr. Levine. The way she moved, the particular angle of her head when she was thinking. She's interacting with the geometry around her, manipulating it with appendages that aren't quite arms anymore. She seems purposeful, engaged. The vision lasts only seconds before the sphere stabilizes, becoming opaque again. But what I've seen changes everything I thought I understood. The shadow dimension isn't consuming ours. It's preserving us, translating us into forms that can survive the merger of realities. I frantically write this revelation in my journal, sketching what I saw as best as my limited perception allows. Three-dimensional drawings of four-dimensional concepts, crude approximations at best, but better than nothing. As I write, I become aware of a presence behind me. I don't turn. I don't need to. I know what I'll see, another entity, another shadow configuration come to observe the observer. I'm not ready yet, I say aloud, still writing. I still have work to do here. The presence doesn't respond, but it doesn't leave either. It waits, patient in a way only beings outside normal time can be. When I finish documenting my vision, I finally turn to face it. This entity is different from the others I've encountered. More defined, more stabilized in our dimension. Its geometry reminds me of a fractal, endlessly complex yet following distinct patterns. It extends what might be a limb, might be pure intention given form. Not threatening offering. I shake my head. Not yet. The entity withdraws, but before it leaves, it creates a distortion in the air. An image forms, wavering like a mirage, a map of Phoenix with certain locations illuminated. 7 points of light forming a familiar pattern. The Big Dipper. The same pattern I noted in my journal weeks ago, when I first observed that the shadow entities were creating large-scale configurations across the city. What are these places? I ask. The entity doesn't answer in words, but understanding forms in my mind anyway. Thresholds. Windows. Places where the barrier between dimensions has grown so thin that one can see through to the other side. Like the sphere behind me. Why show me this? To prepare. To witness. To understand. The entity dissolves, passing through the solid wall as if it were mist. I'm left alone with my journal and a mental map of 7 locations where I might glimpse the future that awaits us all. I spend the next 3 days visiting each location marked in the pattern. Each holds a sphere like the one in the hospital, each showing a different aspect of the shadow dimension. In a downtown bank vault, I see vast energy structures that might be their version of technology. In an elementary school gymnasium, I observe what could be a learning center where newly transformed humans are adapting to their expanded perception. At the botanical garden, the final point in the pattern, I find the largest sphere yet, filling the entire desert biome dome. Through it, I see what might be the entity's equivalent of history, cascading sequences of events displayed in 4-dimensional tableaus. And among these, I recognize Earth's timeline, our past, present, and multiple potential futures branching like neural networks. Most branches end abruptly in darkness. Extinction events, nuclear war, climate collapse, resource depletion. But one branch continues, weaving into the higher dimensional reality I'm observing. In this timeline, our current path, humanity doesn't end. It transforms. I return to my temporary shelter, an abandoned apartment on the city's edge. The shadow matter has begun to creep up the walls here too, but slowly, almost respectfully, leaving me space to continue my work. As I update my journal with everything I've learned, I hear it, the emergency broadcast system, coming to life one final time. The sound emanates from my long-dead phone, impossible but happening nonetheless. Attention all remaining citizens. The containment protocol has failed. Repeat, containment has failed. The Phoenix anomaly has spread beyond all quarantine boundaries. Dimensional bleeding reported in Tucson, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and continuing outward at approximately 57 miles per day. There is no further evacuation possible. May God have mercy on us all. The broadcast dissolves into static, then silence. I close my journal and look out the window at the transformed city. The shadow entities move more freely now, their geometries more complex, more confident in our dimension. They're building something vast, a structure that spans the entire downtown area. Not physical in the way we understand buildings, but a framework of intersecting dimensional planes that seems to strengthen the connection between our world and theirs. I should feel horror at the broadcast confirmation that the phenomenon is spreading unstoppably. Instead, I feel a strange peace. The entities aren't malevolent destroyers. They're architects of a new reality, one where consciousness can exist beyond the limitations of three-dimensional space and linear time. My shadow stretches across the floor, no longer bound by the normal rules of light and reflection. It reaches toward the wall, extending impossibly, creating patterns that echo the mathematical equations filling my journals. I understand now that I wasn't spared by chance. I wasn't left behind because I was unworthy of transformation. I was left to witness, to document, to understand, so that when my time comes, I'll embrace the change rather than fear it. And I think that time is very near now. 2 months since the first emergency alert. The outside world has gone silent. No more broadcasts, no more military aircraft passing overhead, no more distant explosions as the authorities tried, and failed, to contain what began in Phoenix. I've established a hideout in an underground parking structure, its concrete walls lined with salvaged mirrors. The reflective surfaces create a bubble of relative stability. The shadow matter advances more slowly here, giving me time to think, to prepare, to decide. My journals have become something beyond documentation now. The mathematics I've been developing with the entity's guidance has evolved into a theoretical framework for understanding dimensional transition. Equations that describe how consciousness can exist across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. Formulas that map the translation of three-dimensional neural patterns into something more complex, more enduring. I no longer need to eat much. Sleep comes rarely. My body feels increasingly irrelevant, a temporary housing for a mind that's already beginning to extend beyond its biological constraints. I catch myself staring at nothing for hours, my thoughts moving in patterns that have no language equivalent. The mirror directly across from where I sit shows a reflection that isn't quite synchronized with my movements. When I raise my hand, my reflection follows a split second later. When I turn my head, my reflection anticipates the motion. Little desynchronizations that would have terrified me weeks ago, but now feel like glimpses of what's to come. I'm interrupted by a sound I haven't heard in weeks: footsteps. Human footsteps, hesitant but purposeful, moving down the ramp toward my hideout. I grab the steel pipe I've kept for protection, though I haven't needed to use it. The shadow entities ignore me now, recognizing me as something between, no longer fully human, not yet transformed. Hello? A woman's voice echoes in the concrete chamber. Is someone there? I saw the light. I lower the pipe slowly, disbelieving. Lisa? My sister emerges from the shadows, thinner than I remember, her clothes dirty and torn, but unmistakably alive. Her eyes widen at the sight of me. Oh my God, she whispers. You're really here. I've been searching for weeks. She rushes forward, and I find myself wrapped in the first human embrace I've experienced in months. She feels solid, real, warm, so different from the abstract geometries I've grown accustomed to studying. How did you find me? I ask when we finally separate. How did you even get into the city? The military had it completely cordoned off. Lisa sits on a concrete barrier, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. The cordons collapsed about 3 weeks ago. Whatever's happening here, it's happening everywhere now. Slower in some places, faster in others, but spreading. She looks at the mirrors surrounding us. Though I've never seen anything like what's happening in Phoenix. It's like the epicenter. It is, I confirm, handing her a bottle of water from my dwindling supplies. This is where it started. The dimensional breach. Dimensional breach, she repeats, testing the words. That's what the government called it before communications went down. They said it was contained, that Phoenix was sacrificed, but the rest of the country was safe. She laughs bitterly. Just another lie. I show her my journals, explaining what I've learned about the entities, about the transformation happening around us. She listens with surprising calmness, occasionally asking questions that reveal her own understanding of what's happening. You've seen them too, I realize. The shadows, the entities. She nods. They're everywhere now. Most people can't see them clearly. They just know something's wrong, that reality isn't working right anymore. But I've always been able to see them, ever since the first reports from Phoenix. She pauses, studying me. That's why I had to find you. I knew if anyone could make sense of this, it would be you. I'm not sure sense is the right word for what I've been doing, I admit, gesturing to my latest journal with its impossible equations and multidimensional diagrams. Understanding, maybe. Accepting, definitely. Lisa stands, moving to examine the shadow matter that's beginning to creep across the ceiling despite the mirrors. Unlike most people who instinctively avoid it, she reaches up, letting her fingers brush against its surface. It responds to her touch, swirling in patterns that mirror her fingerprints. It's beautiful in its way, she says softly. Everyone's so afraid, running and hiding, but they don't see what's really happening. This isn't an invasion. It's not destruction. It's evolution, I finish for her, a door opening to something beyond what we've been. She turns back to me, and I notice something I missed before, a subtle distortion around her edges, as if she's not entirely contained within three-dimensional space anymore. You're already changing, I say, not a question but a realization. Yes. She sits beside me again, taking my hand. Her touch feels normal and not normal simultaneously, warm human skin overlaid with something else, something that resonates at frequencies I shouldn't be able to perceive. I think that's why I could see them from the beginning, why I knew I had to find you. We're both compatible. Compatible, I repeat, understanding the significance. The entities, they're selecting for certain minds, certain neural patterns. People who can survive the translation. Lisa nods. I think so. Everyone responds differently. Some fight it. Those are the ones who disappear suddenly, leaving only shadows. Others, like you and me, were being prepared, given time to understand, to adapt gradually. We spend the night sharing what we've learned, comparing experiences. Lisa tells me of blooms happening across the country, places where the dimensional barriers have thinned completely, where reality has been fully rewritten according to the new physics. She's visited several, witnessing firsthand what I've only seen through the dimensional windows. There's one forming now, she says as morning approaches, just north of here. I can feel it. I can feel it too, a pulling sensation, like gravity from a direction that shouldn't exist. You want to go there, don't you? I do. Her expression is serene, decided. I'm ready. I've been ready for weeks, just looking for you first. To say goodbye? To give you a choice. She stands, extending her hand to me. Come with me. See what I've seen. After that, if you still want to stay to keep documenting, you can. But I think once you experience it directly, you won't want to return. I look around at my mirror fortress, my journals, the tools I've been using to understand what's happening. They suddenly seem inadequate, like a child's drawings trying to capture the complexity of quantum physics. What is it like? I ask. When you step fully into their dimension? Lisa smiles, and for a moment, her form shifts, revealing glimpses of something more complex, more beautiful than her human shape could contain. It's like waking up from a dream where you could only see in black and white, and suddenly realizing the world has always been in color. It's like being blind from birth and suddenly gaining sight. There are no words in our language for what it's like because our language evolved to describe a tiny fraction of what reality actually is. She extends her hand again. Come with me. See for yourself. I hesitate, not out of fear, but out of a lingering sense of responsibility. My journals, my documentation. What will happen to all I've learned if I go? As if reading my thoughts, Lisa gestures to the shadow matter creeping across the ceiling. All of this will be preserved. Everything you've observed, everything you've written, it becomes part of the collective understanding. Nothing is lost in the translation, only transformed. I look down at my own shadow, stretching independently across the floor, forming patterns that echo the equations in my journal. It's been preparing me all along, teaching me the language of its dimension, showing me glimpses of what awaits. I'll come, I say, taking her hand. But not to decide. I think I've already decided. Lisa smiles, and together we walk up the ramp toward daylight, though day has become a relative concept in Phoenix, where the sky pulses with colors that have no names in human language. The choice was never really about staying human or becoming something else. It was about how to make the transition, fighting at every step, or embracing the profound understanding that awaits on the other side. Day 93. The final emergency broadcast came through last night, just static punctuated by 3 words that repeated until the signal died. We are transformed. I emerged from my underground sanctuary this morning. The mirrors that had kept me safe now seem like childish talismans. The bunker that had been my home for weeks felt suddenly claustrophobic, a relic of a reality I no longer fully inhabited. Something has changed within me. I can feel it, a subtle shift in perception that allows me to see beyond what human eyes were designed to comprehend. Phoenix no longer exists as a city, not in any recognizable sense. The landscape before me defies description, but I'll try. For posterity, for whoever, whatever, might find this journal after I'm gone. The buildings remain, technically, but they've become scaffolding for something else. Massive geometric structures intersect with familiar architecture, creating impossible angles where shadow matter has solidified into forms that hurt to look at directly. Streets flow upward, spiraling into the permanently darkened sky. Light behaves differently here now. It bends around certain objects, pools in midair, fragments into spectra no human language has names for. I should be terrified. I was terrified for so long. But terror requires a certain investment in survival that I no longer possess. The air vibrates with a frequency just below hearing. My skin prickles with it, the boundary between dimensions growing thinner by the hour. I can see the shadow realm now, or at least portions of it, superimposed over what remains of our world. The 2 realities occupying the same space, incompatible yet merging. My sister was right. 3 weeks ago, when Kate found me, having somehow navigated through the chaos to reach Phoenix, she tried to explain what she'd witnessed on her journey. The blooms, she called them. Areas where the shadow dimension fully manifested, creating structures and conditions that violated every natural law we've built our understanding of the universe upon. It's beautiful once you stop fighting it, she'd said, her eyes reflecting patterns I couldn't yet see. It's not destruction, James. It's evolution. I didn't believe her then. Couldn't. I was still desperately clinging to human reality despite its obvious collapse. Even as she stepped willingly into her shadow, her expression one of wonder rather than fear, I remained behind, surrounded by my pathetic barrier of mirrors. But something changed during these final weeks alone. Perhaps prolonged exposure to the boundary has altered my brain chemistry. Perhaps it's simple adaptation. Survival requires flexibility, after all. My journal entries from the early days seem almost comical now. My desperate attempts to rationalize, to find logical explanations for the shadows. The physicists' theories about dimension bleeding and particle acceleration experiments gone wrong. The military's impotent attempts to combat an entirely new physics with weapons designed for an older, simpler reality. The truth, as I understand it now, is both simpler and infinitely more complex. We were always just temporary arrangements of matter and energy. The explosion, if that's even what it was, simply revealed a more fundamental layer of reality that was always there, underlying our limited 3-dimensional experience. I walk now through what was once downtown Phoenix. The shadow architecture towers above me, structures that seem to extend in directions I still lack words to describe. Not up or down or sideways, but elsewhere, occupying spaces that exist between conventional dimensions. Near what was once Jefferson Street, I encounter my first direct manifestation of the new reality. A geometric form hovers in what used to be a plaza, a crystalline structure that simultaneously appears solid, liquid, and gaseous. It rotates along axes that shouldn't exist, revealing facets that seem to contain entire landscapes, cities, universes within. I should run. The old me would have run. Instead, I approach it. As I draw closer, the structure's rotation slows. It seems to orient toward me, though it has no front or back that I can discern. And then, I see them. Within the facets, within the shadows themselves, I see people. Not as prisoners or victims, but as patterns of energy and consciousness preserved and transformed. I recognize some of them. Kate is there, her essence recognizable despite its new form. The military deserter who sacrificed himself. The physicist whose equations predicted this very outcome. They exist now as thought patterns in living geometry, their consciousness expanded rather than extinguished. Not dead. Changed. I press my hand against the structure's surface. It feels like cool water and hot glass simultaneously. Through this touch, I receive not words but direct understanding, consciousness transferred without the clumsy medium of language. We are still here. We are more than we were. Join us. I pull my hand away, overwhelmed. Not afraid, but not quite ready. Back in the early days, we theorized that reflective surfaces repelled the shadow entities. We were wrong. Mirrors simply showed us the truth we weren't prepared to see, that the shadows weren't invaders but revealers, pulling back the curtain on a reality that always existed beneath our limited perception. I make my way to Encanto Park, or what remains of it. The lake is still there, its surface perfectly still despite the absence of normal physical laws. It reflects not the shadowed sky above, but something else entirely, a vista of impossible beauty, the fully realized dimension that has been bleeding into ours. My shadow stretches before me on the lake's edge, no longer bound to my movements. It has been patient, waiting for me to understand, to accept. It extends across the water now, creating a bridge to somewhere else. I take out this journal one last time, my final record as this version of myself. The pen feels increasingly foreign in my hand. Words seem like such crude tools now, like trying to describe a symphony using only sticks and stones. I know now why there were no victims after the explosion, only shadows. We weren't being erased, we were being preserved in a more fundamental form. The emergency wasn't the intrusion of something alien, but the revelation of something that was always there, waiting for us to evolve enough to perceive it. I place the journal on the shore. Perhaps someone still clinging to the old reality will find it. Perhaps it will help them understand that there is nothing to fear. My shadow stretches before me, a door standing open. I step forward. The sensation is unlike anything human experience prepared me for. Not pain, not pleasure, but a radical expansion. My consciousness unfolds like origami in reverse, revealing dimensions of thought and perception that were always folded away inside me. I see everything now. The shadow realm isn't dark at all. It's filled with types of light our limited eyes could never process. I perceive time not as a line, but as a landscape that can be traversed in any direction. I feel the thoughts of others not as intrusions, but as harmonies in a greater composition. As my body dissolves into the darkness, I finally understand. The shadows weren't the aftermath of the explosion. We were. Temporary shadows cast by a greater reality, now returning to our true form. The transformation is complete. I am home,